Hello, I am Ed Metz from the U.S. Department of Education's Institute of Education Sciences, where I lead the Small Business Innovation Research Program. Welcome to the 8th Annual Ed Games Expo and to this evening's masterclass session where an ed tech developer will provide educators an example of how to implement their education technology intervention from a remote setting. It goes without saying that supporting every student to become proficient in mathematics is fundamental. Yet, many students struggle to stay engaged and to become proficient in pre-algebra and foundational middle school math that's needed to be successful in more complex STEM topics going forward. Today's masterclass features a collaborative, story-based game called Empires, which provides opportunities for students to learn math in context. Empires was developed by New Mexico-based developer Mid-School Math with support from the Department of Education's SBIR program. After the masterclass, stay tuned for an engaging Q&A session with the founder of Mid-School Math, Scott Laidlaw, and a group of 5 math educators from around the country. Now off to Scott Laidlaw in New Mexico for the masterclass on Empires.
For a student entering the U.S. school system today in mathematics, studies show that only 1 in 4 graduate proficient, and they likely face a steep decline as the complexity of the subject increases. We call this the mid-school math cliff. Why students are going over the math cliff is probably the biggest story problem in all of education. What we know is that if we're going to fix it, we're going to have to do things differently. I'm Scott Laidlaw, and this is your masterclass. My first year of teaching, the problem was completely apparent. Only 20% of my students were graduating the 8th grade proficient in mathematics, and they were totally unmotivated by the 710-page textbook that they had to work with. The idea that we had was to build semester-long story-based games where we would immerse students into a context such as building an Old West town. Or another one where we immerse them into the spice trade of the 1600s. And another one where students could build their own empires in ancient Mesopotamia on this large board map. But my favorite story is of a student who didn't really like math, but he loved playing empires. And he'd come to school early that day and he's out on the playground and he slipped and he fell. And the administration had him call his parents to meet him at the hospital, and he got on the phone with his arm sort of just hanging there with a fracture. He said, "Can you meet me there at 10 a.m. after math class?" That's when we knew that we were on the right track to develop Empires into a fully digital version with the support of the U.S. Department of Education.
Ancient Mesopotamia. Your village is in crisis. Your father, the Provident, traveled into the desert with a trade caravan months ago and has not returned. As successor, you now must lead. It is up to you, young Provident, to guide your people to build an empire.
But here's the part I can't figure out. How many workers will we need to get the job done by sunrise?
Tell us, Provident, how wide should the ditch for the new field be? Please help us make a plan, Provident. How much square footage of housing is needed for our population?
How many arrows will I need this season?
The number one problem that you have when you start to build one of these technological innovations is that they often match the way that we've done things in the past. And the way that we've done things in the past is that we've got a large textbook, a lot of information that we want students to learn. But the only way for us to get them to learn that is to offer out some sort of a trick. You might even see it in one of those big three-dimensional math games where students are traveling through a tunnel and up pops an equation and they solve that equation and then the door will open. What this is teaching is that math is literally disconnected from what's actually occurring. And that happens throughout all of our curricula. The problem is when we keep giving that type of reward, which is some metaphorical type of carrot, the brain starts to build a singular neural pathway where essentially it expects to receive that carrot for doing that work. Do this, get that. And the ability to do complex math or transfer learning to a novel situation is almost entirely impaired. By the time students reach middle school and the concepts are a little bit more complex, those strategies begin to fail, which is why we start to see that math cliff. If we want our students to be able to succeed in those upper level mathematics, we've got to give them a different approach, a different type of strategy.
You guys can go ahead and log in and play the game and make sure you're helping those that ask for help if you can help them and give them assistance.
This has to equal that. That's how you can't just divide it. That's what I was trying to do.
The question is this: the problems that students encounter in a game like Empires are likely to be far more complex than they would be in their normal curricula. They intertwine multiple standards, they're multi-step, and they might take a full class period or even 2 full class periods to be able to complete. So what is it that makes them persevere and stick with it when normally they would not?
The wheels for the riding carts of our people have always been made of ironwood like this, and they always measure 2 knuckle bones thick and 12 knuckle bones across. This design honors the sun and the moon as they ride across the sky. Provident, the 12 ironwood timbers are that large at the base. We can make some of these wheels Hotep speaks of, but the timbers quickly taper to a smaller diameter. We'll only be able to construct a few of these wonderful new riding carts of yours. I wonder...
So?
Huh?
Look!
Nice try, my child, but not quite. Hotep's riding carts only need 2 wheels, and both need to be much larger. So, this is a design for a different kind of cart.
This isn't a cart for riding, it's for carrying loads of bricks.
Yeah.
We can train our animals to pull the carts. Our workers will be able to move fast through the village, carrying heavy loads quickly.
A good idea, yes, but training the animals will take time and take them away from other work. Provident, I would advise you to build some of both kinds of carts. We'll need to measure this ironwood carefully and determine just how many animals we'll need to train. Provident, your assistance, please. How many total carts can we build?
In an online class, we were using the game Empires to try to determine what it is that gets students to stick with it or persevere longer than they might normally in other situations. And there were 3 things that we found that really impacted the likelihood of students doing that. And the first one is that the students have to have a purpose or a reason for them to solve the problem. But the second is teacher messaging.
We don't value fast work. Fast work is sometimes quick work. We're trying to get through something. We don't value that. We value that you all have the time to think about what it is that you're doing. And it's totally okay to be stuck. It's totally okay to feel like you don't quite know what to do. It's totally okay to go slow.
The students are used to those quick rewards. So you have to have a teacher message that lets them know that it's okay to change the pace.
So I'm looking at this, and I kind of guessed sometimes, but one of the hints, it said there are 12 logs, 12 timbers or whatever, and you're making wheels out of 12 inches and 8 inches, right?
What is that unit of measure? Is it an inch?
It's knuckle bones.
What do you think a knuckle bone is?
An inch. Because if it was feet or anything, it'd be very big. We could use the 14-inch wheels to make 12-inch wheels and the 10-inch wheels to make 8-inch wheels. Would that be 6 times 12?
Cool.
And now we got these ones. We got meaty carts.
Okay.
They're half a knuckle bone, and they're 8 knuckle bones. What? No, tall. I don't know. 384. Or there's 96 wheels.
Okay.
There's 4 wheels per cart.
As you listen to the student thinking through the problem, you'll notice that they have to backtrack, that they've got to revise their thinking. They've got to constantly track what unit they might be talking about. Is it knuckle bones? Is it inches? But as time elapses, they begin to make sense of it.
There's 48 wheels here between 12 and 10 and 10 and 8.
Yeah.
You get 24 wheels from one of these, so it's a lot of these. So you got 288 plus 72, because that's how much Hotep carts there are.
Okay.
You get 360.
You want to try that and see what happens?
I did it.
And once they get it, that's the reward. The reward is that they comprehend the mathematics and they have carts for their village. The math and the story are seamlessly connected, building a synapse in the brain. And the funny thing is, once they're done with it, the grapple doesn't seem all that hard.
My brain was hurting just for a little bit, and then it started coming together.
How long did it take you to do that one math problem, Jackson? Do you know?
Since we started today, it was about 10 minutes probably.
When you get your students working through problems like this, that's the kind of practice that's going to help prevent them from falling off of that math cliff. But we mentioned that there are 3 things that you have to do. And so our work as teachers is not yet done. There is one more thing that you have to do to help your students succeed.
Now comes the hard part. We have to carve the head of the winged bull so it fits perfectly into that notch.
Wouldn't that have been easier to do while the crossbeam was still on the ground?
What's done is done.
But we can't just guess at it and then lift it up to see if it fits. That headstone probably weighs as much as 8 camels.
That's why I said now comes the hard part.
If you could do an MRI imaging study of every student across the United States to see and detect what part of their brain is being used and what emotion it is or reaction they have to mathematics, sure, you'd find some differences. Some would be happy, some would be sad, some might be excited about it, but the single number one thing that you would find in that brain is fear. The thing about fear that is interesting is that it doesn't matter if it comes from an imaginary monster from childhood, a live reptile from today, or math tests. It does the same thing to the brain. It shuts down normal thinking so that the activity occurs in the center of the brain, the amygdala, known as the fight or flight response. It might help from running from those monsters or reptiles, but it is particularly destructive when it comes to math. Mathematical thinking is dispersed throughout the brain, and all it takes is that extra little bit of pressure and fear to shut it all down.
I wasn't able to do anything. I logged in.
Okay.
But each time I tried to do the problem, I had a panic attack.
Did you try the same problem over and over, or did you look at different ones?
Different ones.
And same thing, too much? Okay.
To break through these moments of fear or panic, we need a really powerful antidote. And most teachers go at this by giving students what we might call a pre-perfected set of information so that students can inch along towards a solution. A challenge for us is that then the next time a student is trying to solve a problem, they're going to look for that information, or they're going to look for their teacher. And if it's not there, they're going to go right back into that panic mode. A much more powerful way of handling this is to allow students to see each other's work with all the mistakes included.
My thinking wasn't too different from everybody else's.
For the teacher, that causes a little bit of fear because they think, oh no, they're learning the wrong procedure or they're learning the wrong method. But for a student, it is life-giving because if another student can make a mistake, so can I. And that's what unlocks us from the fear and the panic mode.
All I did was, well, I brought the two tools into a different tab and the picture of the wing and bull gate to a different tab so I could line it all together. And I made the tool as straight as possible. And I tried to line it up with the edges of where the wing and bull is gonna be. So it could possibly help me find the angle that it's tilted at.
Do you have
But
any
it's getting-
strategies that you use?
Don't just handle it alone. Try and find outside sources to help you. Could be a family member. It could be like a few hints online. Could be friends. Don't go at it alone.
So we now have that foundation, the rich narrative question that the students want to solve. Students are willing now to work through the problems more slowly because they're not expecting that immediate carrot. And they're able to see each other's work and see each other's mistakes and feel comfortable making those mistakes themselves, failing safely. That's the foundation that we need to get to the point where those synapses in the brain are really firing. But here's the trick. The outcome is part of what creates meaning and understanding of those concepts. So a student who learns math and applies it to building a model rocket will actually understand all of the concepts because the concepts come together and make sense in the outcome of the rocket launching. And for us as teachers, that's what we would call the aha moment.
Oh, I get it now. That's pretty, wow. Wow. That is cool.
It is cool. And it's also what's needed. For 2.5 decades, we've seen students go over the math cliff. And the promise of educational technology is not for us to just take the old way of doing things and put it onto a computer, but to rethink completely the way that we design our curriculum so that we can create meaning and purpose in math, to be able to develop tools that match the way that we think and learn.
You solve kind of problems that would happen in the real world, like finding the area of different homes or building granaries.
Since the first weeks before I started using Empires, it's been really hard for me to do math. And now that I started using Empires, it's really getting better to me. I'm starting doing math better.
It's different because if you just open a textbook, some people will get bored, but if you're interacting with what you're doing, then people are more likely to learn and pay attention.
The process of letting go setting the stage and getting out of the way of the kids to do the learning is essential. And it makes it so that every kid that I have taught through using what I have learned from mid-school math makes them say math class is their favorite class. That's a win. That's a win.
I'm Scott Laidlaw, and this has been your Masterclass.
Welcome back from the Masterclass video by Mid-School Math featuring the Empire's Intervention. Hey, Scott, thanks so much for that great video.
Thanks, Ed.
I always love that story about the student who had the arm injury and he couldn't stop doing math to the point where he didn't even worry about his arm. That's quite a story there.
Yeah, that's a true story. It was apparently a double fracture, and it was pretty.
Ooh, okay. I can't hear anymore. I have to stop there. So we're here with an expert panel of math educators from around the country, and they've just watched the video with all of us. And what's really exciting right now is that we're going to hear from those educators what their questions are and kind of engage in a discussion about Empires and the model that it brings to support math teaching and learning. So with that, our group here, when you give your question, if you don't mind introducing, your name and where you're from and what math grade you teach, and then ask your question, and Scott will be ready to answer the question. So does anyone want to go first? Yeah, Taylor.
Yeah, I'll start. Hi, I am Taylor Farrington. I teach 4th grade math in Dallas, Texas. And my question when I was watching the video was very much so along the means of differentiation. And so I teach 4th grade math, which is kind of sort of on like the lower level of middle school math. So how would it be differentiated for those students who are in 4th grade, but also amongst like when it gets to middle school, the levels that scholars are at in 6th through 8th?
Yeah, so you'll probably hear this theme. I might end up saying this 4 or 5 times today, but my classroom was 5th to 8th grade, special ed to gifted, all in the same classroom when I was teaching. And the 8th grade student could do like an actual t-test, like do all the statistics work for that. And a lot of my 5th grade students had not even the ability to do multiplication tables. So when you're given that context, it's like, how in the world are you going to survive? And the only way that I found that I could survive was by allowing my students to be teachers of other teachers. Not all the time, some of the time. So we've got to have times where we break up into our more what we might call homogeneous groups. But there were a lot of times that we did heterogeneous groupings where my 6th graders work with 5th graders and so on. And they received different types of problems than those that would get the 7th, 8th grade problems. And I think the same thing is true with the intervention of Empires. You got to have students teach each other to survive.
Great. So are the students, does the program automatically assign them problems, or are you doing that as the instructor?
No, the students sort of hunt around and they try to figure out what they can. But the nice thing is that they can select what it is they're going after. And most students will end up selecting 8 or 10 things before they try to dive down into a problem. And they might select an easier problem to start. In a recent class that we're doing online with a group, that's exactly what they're doing. There are a handful of students that are working with the less challenging problems and a handful of students that are working with the more challenging problems. And then we get together and we try to pick one to debrief. So
okay. Well, thanks, Taylor, for that question. Who's next? James.
Hey, I'm James O'Neill. I'm an 8th grade math teacher here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And as I was watching the video, I just wanted to know what content are teachers responsible to introducing or remediating or enriching along the way?
Yeah, I appreciate that question too, because this is backwards from everything that we normally do. Most of the time we think we have to teach up front, and then so that they're prepared for what it is that they encounter. I've seen this now with dozens of teachers that are implementing Empires successfully. What they do is they essentially throw it out into the wild after having preparation for the beginning of the year. So they know what concepts are coming. They've done some pre-teaching of it, but they don't walk into a classroom typically and say, oh, here's the information that you're going to run into in Empires in 10 minutes. It's normally reverse. You want to have the students encounter that content first. And then for Empires, it's all of 7th grade content. So every single standard in 7th grade in the Common Core is what's embedded in the game, as well as some 8th grade concepts.
Yeah, James, your question is something I've been thinking about too for Scott. Scott, how feasible is this for a new teacher to pick up? Like, yeah, I want to use Empires, but is there a steep learning curve for educators to get it going?
Well, we've got, like I mentioned, Ed, dozens of teachers who use this with thousands of students. And the places where it works the best is where the teachers feel comfortable enough actually just assigning it, which takes a handful of seconds, and then doing what we call getting out of the way. There's a saying that learning is a little bit like the growth of a plant. You water it, you give it enough soil, you get enough sunlight, but then you got to get out of the way. And so that's a big part of the context. Normally as teachers, as interventionists, we want to give each piece of information. That's not the goal here. We want the students to be teaching each other. Building that foundation or the culture of teaching each other, now that takes some time. And that would be a question back to you all is, what are the challenges that you might find in your own schools or your own classrooms about building a culture where students are willing to teach each other?
Yeah, I think every math educator could kind of answer that question. Does anybody want to kind of give Scott your greatest challenge with kind of co-teaching, collaborative learning?
I think one of the things, the challenges is this thinking about the scope and sequence of the standards and getting through that. And I know when watching the video, like 42 minutes went by before the student actually got the problem. And so you're like, this is a class period and they got one thing correct. So like that whole mindset change of like the standards are embedded within the program and they're going to work through and see things that, like you said, are mixed in. I think that is a hard thing, a mindset for us to think through when you're thinking like as math teachers, sometimes there's a joke to say this is the first day of school, but we're already behind, and so it's getting through the content, honestly.
Math teachers always have the best humor, Thanks, James. Anybody else want to kind of talk about some of the challenges they could imagine, I guess, with a new innovation in a classroom? Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel Koval. I teach advanced 5th grade math in Baltimore, Maryland. I just want to kind of go off of what James just mentioned about our scope and sequence. Many times larger districts are really tied to our curriculums. We're really funded, or we have these contracts with larger companies. So when I was watching this, I was really intrigued by that, 40-minute struggle, productive struggle. What is the timeline for a program like Empires? How much do you dedicate of your month or your week or your class period?
So mid-school math builds and creates core curriculum, and we actually spend we recommend a little more than the first third of the year following a scope and sequence. And then when you introduce Empires, we introduce it with what we call an intensive, a 1-week intensive for Empires where we devote our time to that. And then it becomes a Friday afternoon, every other Friday afternoon to completion, so that we're not devoting every last second to it. We've got to keep up with that scope and sequence. And then the tool set that's there for a teacher is like everything else, you've got a very sequenced, on day 1, do this to introduce it. On day 2, do this to introduce it. So that first week intensive, you've got the usability materials to move forward with it. Once you're into the 4th or 5th week, it's a self-driving machine. You walk in, you tell the students to log into Empires. They know what to do, but you've got to follow the scope and sequence, or you'll find yourself out of a position teaching math. So we respect that.
Great. Do you find that when educators make the change, I mean, you're used to the kind of standard, educators are used to their standard methodology and curriculum, and they move to Empires. What's that change like in the first year? Is it kind of seamless, or what do you think, Scott?
Yeah, so Ed, it's never, I don't think, 100% seamless to do that. However, it's nothing short of magic. There has been no teacher who's used Empires that we know of that has not desired to use Empires in the future. And that's different than some of other curricula, or even some of our other curricula that's been used. Once they've introduced it, once they figured out some of those basic patterns, then it just sort of works. There's a school that we have that they have an Empires wall, and they build out these colorful pictures and put them up. And so now this whole hallway is covered with these pictures that are reflections from the students. And students now, it's sort of this thing where, in grade 7, we're going to be doing Empires, and they see the Empires wall. So they're sort of prepped. So you're building culture over time. I think that first starting point, anytime you're going to take a first step in anything that's a new habit, that's the point that you got to do it. You kind of have to just take it to get moving with it.
Thank you. Jacqueline, you have your hand up.
Yes, hi. I had a couple questions, and I think they've kind of been answered floating around. I was going to build off what Rachel said, but I actually think it ended up being answered. When I think about this as a supplement, and thinking about a lot of the schools that I work with that tend to work with, I think, 2 very popular curricula as we think of math. How do you feel, or how have you seen, if you have seen Empires integrate itself, or teachers integrate Empires, the program, while they're actually not using a mid-school math program? And maybe that's the question is, do they all use the mid-school math program? And then if not, does this somehow find its way? Is it challenging to integrate certain aspects of the Empires program if you're not using the mid-school math curriculum?
So Jacqueline, initially Empires was built 100% as a supplement. It wasn't built where we had other curriculum that we had actually developed either. So it was built to go in to work with other curricula. And in terms of how it works exactly the same way. There's no difference between working with Eureka or working with another one of the bigger publishers that are out there, where they're working with something. We do a week-long intensive with Empires, and then it's every other Friday from there on out for the end of the year. The one difference, and this is a question that, again, I will pose back to you all, is when the curriculum that we use doesn't tend to design in any of those supportive culture pieces, students teaching other students, building in small groups where teachers can have each group working on a different component, that sort of thing. My question back to you all is, have you seen in situations like that where introduction of anything complex is challenging to do, whether it's teacher developed or whatever else it might be?
Well, I'd like to jump a little bit in here and just mention that when we think about school, I think this is an important time for us to reimagine that which we consider school. You know, we've had these discussions about the formation of what actually school is supposed to be versus how it looks like in different communities. In my classroom, for instance, I rarely have an issue when it comes to trying to get students to collaborate, because kids naturally want to talk to one another. But the way that school operates usually is that they're not allowed to collaborate amongst one another unless the teacher allows for it in very specific role designations in small buckets. So in the way of collaboration, it stems a lot from a philosophy that us as adults, whether it be the teachers in the classroom all the way up to the superintendents and chancellors, we all have to be thoughtful about what it means to actually be a child in a classroom where you can have a situation where folks can collaborate, where students can be teachers of one another, where there is a philosophy of collaboration and caring and community, which I think so many of us would really love to see in our classrooms. So to that end, my question, like, since we're all supposed to contribute one, is what outcomes have you seen, both perhaps quantitatively and qualitatively, where, because I'm thinking back to so many of the questions here, and it's like we have to find ways to try to integrate like this type of program into a school district that may or may not be conscientious of these sort of tensions. And so what are some ways that you've seen like actual change from this program that you would hope that folks would get as a serious outcome? I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be like one or two like numbers or whatever have you, but I would love to hear more about the experience of students that would, hopefully be selling points for so many of these folks.
Yeah, so the original point of actually starting this actually came from my own classroom where, like I mentioned, 20% of the students in 8th grade were proficient when they were graduating. When I first kind of walked in, 700-page textbooks, literally the big stack, and I walked in and thought, and I actually had mutiny dreams. They call them like the teacher mutiny dreams. Your students are going to come get you in the middle of the night and throw you off the ship. And I had those, and I thought, this is terrible. The number one thing, by far the number one thing for an actual gauge of what it does and what I've seen it do over and over and over again, that I would feel comfortable standing behind saying this works in a school like Maya Angelou, which is in DC, that we've been to and we've introduced Empires, all the way to schools in California. The number one thing is student engagement, that we know that students will stick with it longer. The thing about it, though, and that's why I enjoyed doing the master class, because I've never done anything like that before, is because it did come a little bit from some of that explicit messaging. It's okay to go slow. It's okay to take your time with this. It's okay to be stuck. So the number one thing is I've seen students being willing to work on math problems a little bit longer, 4, 5, 6 minutes longer than they would if they had not experienced something like this, because they are engaged. And then back to your original, your other part about building in collaboration, and I love the way that you spoke about it, that you said, in my classroom, I feel like I can get students to collaborate. I don't know that that's automatic, that was something that was automatic for me in my classrooms when I was first using that textbook. There wasn't a conversation between them. And so that was one of the other big outcomes. From a research perspective, we've done a number of different studies with this, using the Empire's technology, the actual tech itself, and building in smaller problems so that we could study its outcomes and doing true randomized controlled trials. We've seen an effect size of what's called a 1.24 is the very highest one. And that's it's about 3 times what we see from a typical intervention. Now, we haven't, in terms of the big time scale studies, does this end up on a long-term study? We don't know that yet. But we certainly can say, at this point, we've got some strong evidence that this is something that works better than the norm for those outcomes. I could talk more about that later, but I don't want to dive too deep.
Great, yeah, and as the person who leads the program that provided the funding to Mid-School Math to develop this intervention, part of the funding is required to go to the type of research that Scott just described. So that's an exciting part of our program at the Department of Education that supports education technology developers in ensuring that the technologies are developed with iterative feedback from you guys along the way, from the educators, and then also with research studies to demonstrate that it can be implemented and that it can be integrated into practice, and to test whether there's promising results for student outcomes. So with that, we're just about at the end. Any last questions before I give my final question to Scott? Jacqueline.
It's not a question. It's actually just a comment. Many of the schools that I've worked with or districts are trying to find ways, particularly in this environment, which went from, being exclusively at home, distance learning, to some version of a hybrid right now. And who knows what's going to happen as we continue to, as Jose said, like rethink schooling, period, from the outcomes we want and the objectives and the purpose that it serves in our society, all the way to what's the functionality daily and what does it look like in our lives. And I think when I think about something like Empires as an addition, it's just nice to have something that, even though it feels gamey, and the kids love games, I think that the idea that it can integrate other content, which is what a lot of the schools have been looking for, can be really powerful. I think it's a real value add that you're dealing with ancient civilizations and the idea that intersects with their history content, and then they can write about it and they get to do the fun gaming part. So I wanted to highlight, I think that is a very big selling point for Empires.
Yeah, and Ed, you had a final question. I'll let you go first, and then I've got a.
Okay, great. I'll kind of make it's sort of a thought. My favorite part of your video was definitely at the front end when you put up the picture of the Old West town, and then you had this giant table where you created looked like a little virtual world, and those were from your days as an educator, and it kind of reminds me of what the great educators do, and I think probably what the people in our group here today do. You guys do anything you can to deliver the content and the instruction, whatever it takes. So Scott, my question is that you were so unbelievably creative years ago. Did you ever imagine, years later, you would develop like a technology platform to be able to deliver this intervention at scale? I mean, did you ever imagine you'd ever reach that level?
No. So true story that the way that this came about is that from the Empires game, they had to call me if they wanted to build an alliance, because the time they could build alliances, but then because they could work together, that gave them an advantage over other students. And so they had to call me to make sure, or they had to give my approval. So I had two kids. They called me over spring break to see if they could build an alliance. And a friend who was there, who was a software developer, said, "You got to get software to take care of some of this stuff." That was the first part of the process. But Ed, the very quick answer to it is a no, not at all. Of course, I had no idea that we were going to build full core curriculum when we did. And then out of this, after building core curriculum for the last decade, Empires is still, after 7 years, our richest, most conceptual part of the product. But the idea behind it, or the principle behind it, I had a mentor who would tell us, he would say, the biggest problem in education is the giving of answers to questions that have not yet been asked. The biggest problem in education is the giving of answers to questions that have not yet been asked. He said, time is better spent building a need to know than it is giving information. Build that need to know and then get out of the way, and you're gonna do okay with your students. And so the same foundational principle, delivering the mail. We had that horse that you saw in the video. That horse delivered our math problems each and every day. We had this woman would come down and deliver our math problems. Now they were couched as the Old West math problems, but essentially each day the kids would come out and get their information from that. Now they have a need to know because they've got to build their little village or town. But those same principles are all the way through and through the technology that we're trying to build. And then, no, it's completely shocking sometimes. And then most days it's like all the rest of us for our work. It's just building one little piece after another, which is, I think, what we do as educators. And I think that's why it's exciting, because we're all here trying to do the same thing.
Great. Well, that's a perfect way to end this question and answer session. And I would just want to thank our great educators around the country. Thanks, Scott. And we'll hopefully see you in person next year at the Ed Games Expo. Thank you, everybody.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.